is finished, I'm coming back for you.
If we shadows have offended, think but this and all is mended, that you will but have slumbered here, as these visions will appear, and this weak and idle theme, which will be no more yielding than a dream, but gentles do not reprehend, and if you pardon, eventually we mend, and as I am an honest god, and if we have some kind of dog, if we scrape the chaos slime and hope to make amends in time, else this demon a liar call. So when we finish unto you all, give me your hands and we be friends, and this demon shall restore amends. Or hi everybody and welcome to the Fluffenhammer.
That was my favourite entrance ever to this podcast. I mean, I've liked them all, Adam, to be honest. I've liked them all. They always do something for me, but that one was my favourite. I was not expecting spontaneous poetry this evening.
Well, yeah, let's try and be a bit classy, a bit of the bar.
Well, considering the subject matter this evening, and considering that we're exploring literature, yes, I think that's a good idea.
Indeed. Yes. So, as always, I am Adam, I'm Gruffy, your host, and with me tonight is one other. It is the Master of Madness himself, George.
Oh, I like that. Master of Madness, yes. That suits me just fine.
The Ringmaster of Insanity.
I also like that too.
I just do this all night.
Anything involving madness, malevolence, evil, sadism, anything to that effect, I'm all for that.
The Shopkeeper of Chaos?
Yes, I really like the image that plants, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of almost like a Lovecraftian supermarket.
Yeah, that's buy 3 tentacles, get one free.
Oh god, that could be a story. I may store that somewhere in my subconscious and bring that back out later.
Welcome to Lovecraft and Sons.
Good god.
Established ages.
What would they sell? Lots of whelks and lots of sort of sea-based items, I'd imagine.
Please be careful when entering the store. There is a step that is non-Euclidean.
Yes, does it have a seafood section? Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yes, the food sees you and eats you.
It's extremely large.
By seafood, we mean Raleigh itself.
Yeah, although I imagine...
Welcome to Lovecraft and Sons.
You could actually really offend certain entities from Lovecraft's mythology by having a seafood section. I can't imagine the people from Innsmouth taking that well to it.
Would like some frozen deep one.
I mean, let's face it, it's practically cannibalism to them, isn't it?
It is a bit, isn't it? Although I'm liking the idea of doing it like open all hours.
That would be great.
It explains why the till keeps trying to kill people.
So, yeah. That's
right. It's sentient. It's sentient, I say.
Brilliant. It's like brains in canisters, that sort of thing.
So, what are you doing tonight, Arkwright? Well, it seems the cats are going to take me to the moon.
Tubs of Shoggoth slime. Lovely.
This isn't a Lovecraft episode, I promise.
Well, all things... I mean, as we've discussed before, there is... this is not just a tangent, ladies and gentlemen. There is a heavy Lovecraft influence in Games Workshop's mythologies, so we're not just entirely diverting onto something we want to talk about.
Well, if you want to know more about Lovecraft, please go back in time to meet Howard Lovecraft.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't advise that myself.
No.
By all accounts, not a nice man, but a very, very fine writer.
Yes, well, a great idea is
a great idea. Yes. I mean, but, this could go on forever. We could actually do an entire series of podcasts on Lovecraft and his writing.
I'm sure I did.
Yes, I'm sure you did.
I think it was called Lurkers in the Lobby.
Yes, I think you did, yeah. God, I should have been around for that one, I could tell you, Adam, because I could go for ever and ever and ever.
I'm sure, didn't we get you in for one episode?
Lurkers in the Lobby. You did get me in for the a commentary on that really awful adaptation of one of Lovecraft's stories. I can't quite remember which one it was. It's the one with...
neither.
Well, the one with Brown Jenkins.
Dreams in the Witch House.
That's the one, yes. And it was loads of fun because the adaptation was awful.
It's absolutely nothing.
And we really got to grips with that. We really got our teeth sunk into that. But yes, we're actually here to discuss something related but not quite Lovecraft this evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Black Library Book Club, and we're gathered here around our little table in the depths of the forbidden Black Library. We've been allowed in, which is odd, and I have to say I did not like the way the Guardians looked at us on the way in, Adam. I think they may recognise me. Despite my efforts, they may recognise me, and the fact that I've tried to break into the Black Library at least 8 times in the past.
What I found really concerning, cut that out. What I found really concerning was when we entered in and I said, "Oh my, how many books are there here?" And the custodian turned to me in his giant form, and with one mighty finger he said, "Shh."
Yes, I mean, that's another danger of being here, actually. There are other people browsing here. I think I saw Inquisitor Chevak around here at one point, and now that's really weird because he shouldn't be here. We may have slipped into non-Euclidean space here, which may not be the best.
I'm kind of concerned about the unreasonable things with legs.
Yeah.
There are lots of unreasonable things with legs.
Also, I would really advise, for both yourself and the audience, be very careful of anything you touch in here. I mean, there are things in here that look like books that are not, and there are books that are extremely dangerous. Be warned.
This isn't a hot dog.
Be warned.
It screamed. So, what we're here to do is, there was a question that got mentioned on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and it was one that I really wanted to get to grips with, and it was, what can you recommend to somebody who is starting to get into 40k and Warhammer, Age of Sigmar? And this is a really tough one, because if you look at the different worlds of Games Workshop, there are different worlds to get into, different ways of doing it. My first response was just to try and find a way of going, well, here is the entirety of Games Workshop's Inferno, pick and choose, but there's no legal way to do that.
No,
so we won't.
There is not. And it's a very difficult thing anyway, because it's such a broad church. There's so much in both what the old world that was for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, which is developing apace, by the way. There's soon going to be a hell of a lot more material to be getting in there, and for all of the tangential realms and little pocket dimensions that surround them. Really, getting into it synthetically, like with intention, is actually really hard. I mean, most of us,
it is.
We came into it very naturalistically as children, and it's usually through something that snares your interest, as we mentioned before. And I think that's the best way to do it. Get one of the army books, and just pick up a White Dwarf. Find a model or an army or a character that interests you. Then go and get the Codex or the army book, the battle tome, read about it. Then from there, use that as a springboard to go and read the wider fiction. That would be my advice generally. Just follow your enthusiasm. That's the best way to do it, because you will always find inspiring stuff that way.
Oh, yeah. And what helps there as well is that when there is a new codex released, Games Workshop often release a novel to go with it.
Yes.
That is almost like a starter's guide into the flavour.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it's certainly something they started to do in recent years. There was a time, I mean, I remember a time when getting any novels from, this was before the Black Library even. The Black Library is relatively a recent thing, really, in the history of Games Workshop.
But 2004,
yeah,
I think
so very recent, really. I remember a time when there were novels, but they were very rare, and they were very difficult to find. You could sometimes find copies of them, in Games Workshops, but not always. Definitely not always.
No.
And you had to order them. You had to order them specifically, and they didn't have their own pools of writers back then. They just had people who were kind of tangentially involved and often working under pseudonyms. People like Kim Newman, for example, who many people will recognize from his
Anno Dracula,
his Anno Dracula series, which, by the way, is a fabulous series of books, well worth picking up.
Amazing books.
And
which,
also
actually recycles a load of Gotrek and Felix.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, there's loads. There are definite links here. Yeah, definite links here. And also from his journalistic work, as a film critic and whatnot. And also just many people recognize him just by the look of him because he's such a distinct-looking guy.
Do you want to know a secret?
What?
Did you ever see The Prestige? The film The Prestige?
I did, yeah. I loved it.
Yeah. You know the other...
You're trying not to spoil it, aren't you? You're trying not to reveal the twist.
You've got Batman. Right?
Yes, and you've got...
What's it?
I know what you're referring to.
Yeah. The other guy that's always with Batman.
Yes,
For a little while through the film, I was thinking... Is that Kim Newman? Have they got Kim Newman to be his bodyguard?
Yeah.
And it isn't.
No.
It's just a guy in a lot of prosthetics, but it looks so much like Kim Newman. It's freaky.
It does, doesn't it? And I don't know. Maybe that's a legitimate reference to the guy. Who knows? But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But back then, it was very difficult to get a hold of anything, and also what you tended to get back then were lots of aspiring writers who were trying to get a foothold somewhere, who were trying to sort of hone their craft and maybe get a platform somewhere to get something published. And Games Workshop was a very good way in because it's an established universes. You don't have to do enormous amounts of work. You don't have to create your own mythology or anything like that. You just have to create the plot and get your idea going. So that was kind of tricky back in the day. Most of the background came from the books. It came from the army books and whatnot. It really wasn't until, as Adam said, around the early to mid 2000s when the Black Library really started to take off, when the books started to become much more popular and much more readily available. I remember it wasn't the first one I read, but the first big novel that I read from Games Workshop was Storm of Iron by Graham McNeill.
Storm of Iron. I don't remember that
Storm of Iron came out around... it was in the wake of the 3.5 Chaos Space Marine Codex, which remains one of Games Workshop's most popular codices. Everybody loves that book. It just raves about it. And what you got around that time were lots of Chaos players, and I mean a lot. Storm of Iron was... I don't think it was Graham McNeill's first book from Games Workshop, but it was certainly the biggest. It was the one that put him on the map. And Storm of Iron was absolutely everywhere. Because everybody liked the Iron Warriors back then. Everybody loved the Iron Warriors for some reason. And Storm of Iron is about the Iron Warriors, Chaos Space Marines. I picked it up almost on a whim. I saw it in the Derby Games Workshop when I bought my 3.5 Codex, and I had some spare cash at the time. Because I just started university. I had some spare cash, and I just picked it up. And I started I didn't expect it. I mean, I've always been just a fiend for all kinds of fiction, just an absolute fiend. I've always got multiple books on the go. So I thought I'd just try it. I didn't expect it to be amazing. I expected it to be a bit of a sort of like a pulpy kind of what I would call a chocolate bar book. It's the kind of book that's probably kind of fun. It won't last very long. It won't be that sustaining, but it'll be fun. It's something you read in between other things, like a snack between meals. I really enjoyed it. I was very, very impressed with it. It is pulpy, and anything set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe is going to be pulpy and slightly cheesy to a certain degree, because that's just the nature of it. It's just the nature of the universe. But you know what? For what it is, it's really well written. The characters are very defined. The setting is good. The atmosphere, the tone of the book is great. And it's got some really good characters. It's told largely from the perspective of an Iron Warriors warband in the what was then the present day of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So it was the 13th Black Crusade, as it was before it was retconned. So
it'd rather be the third and a half.
Yeah,
Black Crusade.
it's kind of. I mean, it isn't like a. It does fit still. You can still read it as part of the 13th Black Crusade because it is its own. It doesn't have any massive relevance for the wider universe. It doesn't it doesn't establish anything massive. It's just a group of Iron Warriors, a war band of Iron Warriors assaulting a planet called Hydrocordatus. And it's about their warsmith aspiring to demonhood and all of his little lieutenants who each command a host of the warband vying for attention and squabbling with one another. And one of them in particular who becomes really significant called Honsuo, who is a hybrid. He's a Chaos Space Marine and he's very young compared to some of the others. He was actually created from stolen Imperial Fist gene seed. So, as you can imagine, not well liked. He's kind of the whelp of the group. Or he's regarded as the whelp of the group, even though he's entirely capable. I mean, he's aspired to the status not quite of warsmith, but of the leader of a war band within a wider host, you know? So he's not, he's capable, he's entirely capable, he's not very well regarded because of his tainted gene seed. And it's largely told from his perspective and how he interacts with the other Iron Warriors and how he engages with the politics of the war. That's what really impresses me about it more than anything. I mean, there is a lot of bolter porn in it. There's a lot of bolter porn. And this is something you'll find a lot, ladies and gentlemen. If you read any of the Warhammer 40,000 books, you'll find there's a lot of bolter porn. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of actual warfare. Sometimes painted broadly, sometimes told intimately, but they're very action oriented. But what interests me about the book more than anything, as is the case with a lot of the Black Library books, is the quieter moments. It's the character moments where you get a perspective on these guys. They're not just the villains of the piece. The Iron Warriors in Storm of Iron are genuinely aggrieved. They have an axe to grind with the Imperium and the Emperor. And one of the things that it goes out of its way to paint is that these guys, for them, the Horus Heresy never ended.
Okay.
They've been fighting this war for 10,000 years, but it's been an ongoing war. This is just the latest skirmish in it. And over those 10,000 years, their bitterness and their grievances with the Imperium that was and the Imperium that is have developed and grown into this almost religious mythology that defines every aspect of them. It's really fascinating, really interesting, and that's kind of where I came in terms of the fiction.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was actually just listening to you talk.
Yeah,
there
sorry. No, I mean that's.
I need to read.
Yeah,
this.
It's good. It's a good book. It's the kind of thing that expanded the universe massively in my mind because it includes so much incidental and totally redundant detail, like little sci-fi details, you know, about stupid stuff. Like there's one of the Iron Warriors commanders who is. He's not a Khorne worshipper, but he is obviously within the grip of Khorne worship. You can of Khorne's favor. You can tell just by the way he acts. But he has these indentured slaves who help to polish his armor and help to maintain it. And it's really bizarre seeing him interact with these characters. Really strange. But because there are these interpersonal relationships between them and these intimate moments where they're sort of disengaging his armor from him. It's bizarre, but I love it. I absolutely love those moments.
Yeah, that's one I've never read, and I'm going to have to dig out now.
That surprises me. Because it is.
So far in the show, you've got me to buy another book.
Thanks,
yes. George. Thanks.
But as I say, ladies and gentlemen, that was kind of my way in. That's what got me buying the Black Library books, or certain Black Library books. One of the problems with the Black Library, and I imagine one of the things that many people find intimidating is because it's such a vast publishing house. You have lots of different writers writing about lots of different things, and their styles differ. Some of them are undoubtedly more capable writers than others. So there is a sense that if you're going in and just buying a book, then it's pot luck. It might be good, it might be not. So I would advise, if you do like the look of a piece of work, go and take a look at reviews of it before buying it. That would definitely be my advice.
But you mentioned getting into the fiction. And one of the things I was going to mention was the Conrad trilogy. I don't know if you've ever read that.
I haven't read the Conrad trilogy, no, but I've heard of it.
Right. The reason I was going to mention it is because it goes through a lot of the old world. The trilogy books, it starts off in like the middle of the Empire, and it goes right the way out almost to the Chaos Wastes. Then it goes to Kislev. Then it comes right back to Middelheim.
Well, if I remember correctly, weren't those books? Many of the locations in that book were actually. They originally occurred in those books, didn't they? And they fed into the wider background. They actually became parts of the old world map.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Because what this book actually was, it was the first book that spun out of the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, as it was back in the day. So it was the building all of that, which the roleplay then used to build up the world. So it used existing stuff and then built out. So it's really interesting stuff. There is a slight problem as the books themselves, to a 30-plus-year-old that I am, let's not say any more than that, they are terribly written.
Yeah.
They are god-awful, which is annoying because when I was a kid, I fell in love with these books.
Yeah.
The story of Conrad, who is actually a terrible, just awful character, who ends up then being an offspring of Sigmar.
Yeah,
of course he does. But they do it in a good way. He doesn't become, I'm an offspring of Sigmar, and then flies around. It's just at the moment, at the direst of needs, he pictures himself being Sigmar at Galganas and just destroying the orcs and the goblins. And then when he comes back to, he's got an axe, not a hammer, and he's just wiped through a load of Zentian cultists.
Yeah.
So it plays it like that, which is actually quite good.
I mean, that is again something you need to kind of look out for, isn't it? I mean, the early fiction, it was very raw, and it was aimed at a very particular market. I mean, the vast majority of the people involved in Games Workshop in the hobby back then would have been younger people and teenagers. So the fiction isn't quite as good. It's definitely matured. There's not only in terms of the content, but the quality of the writing. I mean, people do, because the audience has matured so much, there is a greater demand for better work now. Yeah.
What I do like, though, through every single Warhammer Fantasy book that I've ever read, there has never been a fetch quest.
No, you don't know.
To my knowledge,
it's not really.
There isn't a Lord of the Rings fetch quest.
No, there isn't. I mean, it's not that kind of world, bizarrely, is it? It's more. It's broader than that. It's much more, as I say, it's much more action-oriented. So really the kind of fetch quests that you would find in, say, one of the D&D novels, which, a lot of the D&D novels consist entirely of those. It's just one fetch quest after another. The characters have to go to this dungeon to find this magic item. Then they have to go to this place to kill the evil lich, to do this, to do that, to do this. That's how they're structured. You don't necessarily find that in either the books based in the old world and the AOS realms, or in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. What you do find are rather expansive pieces of work. I mean, certainly more recently, what they tend to do is expand hugely on the very broad strokes that you find in the army books and in the codices. I think that really started when the Horus Heresy series kicked off. It seemed like the entire ethos of the Black Library shifted then. And the books not only in Warhammer 40,000, but the ones that derive from Fantasy Battle and from AOS, are very different since that point. Very, very different.
Oh, yeah. Very, very, very different.
I mean, the whole thing with the Horus... I mean, a lot of people will have come into the fiction through the Horus Heresy, no doubt, because that is their biggest selling series. That's the one. I mean, if you really want to get into it, if you really want to learn about, certainly the background about Warhammer 40,000, but also if you want to find some of the best examples of work, and sadly some of the worst, then the Horus Heresy series is it. again, I think after Storm of Iron, the book I bought after that, which was some years later, really, was Horus Rising, which is the first book in the Horus Heresy series. I bought Horus Rising, False Gods, and the what's the third one? I think is it Galaxy in Flames, the third one?
No, Galaxy in Flames is a short story.
No,
collection.
I can't quite remember what the third one was, but the third one, those first three are the first books in the Horus Heresy series, and they're essentially the history of the Lunar Wolves, who will then become the Sons of Horus, who will later become the Black Legion. And it's about Horus's fall from grace. And what they do, and they were massively surprising to me when I first picked them up and read them, massively surprising, to the extent whereby I read Horus Rising, put it down, and I remember being in like a slight kind of flustered by it, at how different it was from what I expected it to be, that I picked it up and read it again directly after. To just solidify it in my mind that, okay, this universe has suddenly become much more complex and much more interesting than I thought it ever would be. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've always liked the background, obviously, from...
My apologies, you are correct. Galaxy in Flames.
Galaxy in Flames, I thought it was. Yeah. I've always liked the background, but it's always been in that very sort of broad way. It's been through the details provided in the Codex books and the battle tomes and whatnot. But the details the background that you get in those books is very it is very simplistic. You know, it's a broad stroke. You get a broad flavor of what the armies are like. You don't often get intimate details about characters or anything like that. What the Horus Heresy books do is they simultaneously expand the background enormously, but also refine it. They focus it right down so that you get intimate details about how characters that you may not have known a great deal about, who are just names, really, or archetypes, you get to learn how they operate. You get to see them interacting with one another, and you get to see them not just in battle, you get to see them in repose, you get to see them at peace, you get to see them talking with one another and engaging in... The one thing that really shocked me is how nice Horus is. Yes. What a good guy Horus is. What a really genuinely pleasant, nice, lovely guy Horus is. I think one of the first descriptions you find of him, he's playing a joke on somebody. He's like laughing at somebody. And it's really bizarre. It's really strange. It humanizes these massive mythical characters, the Primarchs, and lends them layers of detail and flavor that they wouldn't have otherwise had. I mean, Horus, up until that point, had no character at all. Really.
No, he was just the snarling bad guy.
Yeah, he was the villain. He was the villain, and that's it. He was the big bad. The Horus Rising in particular goes into the most minute character detail about this guy. It describes his internal conflicts, his uncertainty, and how, even though he is this genetically engineered super being, he is so afraid and so uncertain, and has an almost childlike quality about him, and there's a sort of innocence that's very attractive. Very attractive indeed. It does that not only with the Primarchs, but with the Space Marines in general. The Horus Heresy books, they try to humanize the Space Marines in ways that had never been seen before up till that point. Because you have to bear in mind, these aren't the Space Marines that most people know. Mm-hmm. These are not the Space Marines of the present day Warhammer 40,000 game. Those Space Marines have... the Horus Heresy is part of their history, it's part of their past. They are not part of the Great Crusade, so all of that dynamism, all of that hope isn't with them. The Space Marines in the Warhammer 40,000 universe have this 10,000 years of embittered history behind them, and they operate in an Imperium that is totally different from the one that you find in the early Horus Heresy books. And that is so surprising to me. It was so surprising to me. You get things that they're just accepted now as part of the background. They are just accepted as part of the background. But back then, were totally new. Totally new. Yeah. Like, for example, the notion that the Imperium was a secularist regime. That had never been mentioned before Horus Rising.
No, and then when it starts to... when those seeds have been laid, they're now everywhere, all the way through all the codexes. And well, not as much now. We don't know how it's going to be laying in the codexes coming up. But the ones that came up with the last edition of 40k, yes, they were all over the place.
They're established parts of the background now. I mean, that's what I love. That's what I really love. The Horus Heresy series and a lot of the Black Library books actually have proven so popular and significant that they have started to affect not only the background in the codices, but also the actual rules for the game. I mean, if you look, a very good example, one of my favorite series from the Horus Heresy books, and I would unambiguously recommend these, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the books that deal with the Thousand Sons. The Thousand Sons, as anyone who's listened to this podcast before knows, are one of my favorite legions, full stop. They're one of my favorite elements of the background, full stop. I love the Thousand Sons. But the books that deal with them in the Horus Heresy, and in fact the ones that come after the Horus Heresy, are some of the best series you'll ever read from the Black Library. They're wonderful books, and you can come into it from two different precepts. There are two books. There's A Thousand Sons, which is the early history of the Thousand Sons Legion, from their involvement in the Great Crusade right up to the raising of Prospero. So the point where they don't rebel against the Imperium, they're forcibly ejected or exiled from it. Whereas Prospero Burns comes at the same timeline, but from the perspective of the Space Wolves. So you can actually enter into that history from two different perspectives, which is really cool. What is interesting about them, though, is that you would expect, wouldn't you, that the Prospero Burns would provide a more sympathetic look at the Space Wolves. I don't know whether that was the intention, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. If you read either of these books, you will come away hating the Space Wolves. I mean, absolutely hating them. I don't know whether it's deliberate, whether it is just a part of their background that they are, this is the way they are. But the Space Wolves do not come out well from any of the Horus Heresy books. They just don't. They always come across as belligerent, violent, barbaric assholes every single time they occur. But in A Thousand Sons, what you get is a portrait of the Legion that, very much like the Sons of Horus or the Lunar Wolves in Horus Rising, is entirely surprising. Everything about it almost seems like the writers had an initiative when they wrote these books to almost invert what people expected to find.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. That you go into a lot of the Horus Heresy books expecting to find the dark guys going evil, but what you honestly find is a lot of these people become tainted by their own inquisitiveness or their own passions.
By their human sides.
Down the road. Yeah,
it's by their human sides. I mean, this is something I certainly find. Maybe it's my biases, because I'm always for the bad guys, ladies and gentlemen. I've always, as a child, I always knew the relatives that knew me well, because the ones that knew me well for birthdays and for Christmases would get me bad guys from toy lines. They would not get me Autobots or G.I. Joe characters. They would get me Decepticons, and they would get me Cobra, and they would get me not Spectral Knights, they would get me Darkling Lords. It was always that case. I've got an enormous soft spot for the bad guys. The Devil has the best tunes. The Devil has always had the best tunes. What I love about the Horus Heresy books that explore what will eventually become the Traitor Legion, so really the baddest of the bad. I mean, in many instances, they become characters that are aware of their own malevolence and have made a kind of ideology out of it, almost like a faith out of it. But they are before their fall to damnation, these characters are often the most sympathetic, they're the most human of the Space Marine legions, and they are often not damned by any particular fault of their own. It is very often circumstance that leads them down that route. Yeah. I mean, the Thousand Sons, one thing that A Thousand Sons makes very clear is they don't really have a choice. They're damned from the get-go, really. It's really sad. It's something that adds to the tragedy of the Legion, but Tzeentch, here's something that's really weird. I reread the entirety of the Thousand Sons line recently, not just the Horus Heresy books, but John French's Arhiman series, which comes after. Tzeentch is never mentioned.
No?
Not by name.
Really?
No, not by name.
Okay.
In fact, he even appears. Tzeentch actually appears in the very last book, in Arhiman Unchanged, but he's still not named. It's interesting, isn't it?
That's cool.
It
cool.
almost seems like the Thousand Sons are not aware. They know he exists. They know him in a very abstract way, but they certainly don't actively worship him in the same way that, say, the World Eaters come to worship Khorne, or the Death Guard come to worship Nurgle. Certainly not at this point, anyway. In fact,
that's the big difference between the powers, isn't it?
It really
Grandfather
is.
Nurgle, it's our Lord Khorne.
That's
or
right.
Tzeentch is the guy who's with the stick behind them, finding ways to push them forward.
Right. Tzeentch doesn't want worshippers. Tzeentch isn't that interested in worshippers. Tzeentch is empowered by revolutionaries, by people who exercise their free will, who effect change. So he's actually empowered by people who would defy him, which is why he loves Arhiman so much.
Yes.
Because Arhiman is exactly that. I mean, and actually A Thousand Sons is largely told from the perspective of Arhiman as he is before his fall from grace. And Arhiman is a great character. Arhiman, after reading A Thousand Sons and the books that come after, Arhiman is probably one of my favourite characters in the entire game, in the entire universe of Warhammer 40,000. The reason being, he is as far from the sort of Saruman-like arch sorcerer of evil who appears in the codices as you could imagine. He's not that guy. He's not that guy. He's driven, definitely, and he has an agenda that he will do anything for. He will do anything for, and he does some really terrible things to achieve it. Don't get me wrong. Certainly later on, he does some terrible things.
He's very much the end justifies the means.
Exactly.
And the end is that he's bringing thousands and thousands of people back to human life.
Exactly. He loves his brothers. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
He loves his Legion, and he still thinks he can save it.
Yeah,
he still thinks he can save it. It's amazing. Early on, in A Thousand Sons, he's a fantastic character. He's very human.
Yes.
Very human indeed. He is a very powerful sorcerer. And one of the things that A Thousand Sons establishes is that the Thousand Sons in general, they operate on a level of perception that makes even the other Space Marines seem like children. Their psychic capabilities and their intelligence, the things they know about the hidden mechanisms of reality of this universe, make them almost semi-divine.
Mm-hmm.
Even in comparison to the other Space Marines, but even given that, they can't help themselves. I mean, it's a very despairing look at the whole universe, really. Even given that knowledge and that power, they end up in ultimate states of disgrace and damnation. It's really sad. Yeah. It's really sad. And as someone who knows this back, everybody know. I'm not spoiling anything because everybody who's in this universe knows the story of the Thousand Sons, and everybody knows the raising of Prospero, the flight to Sorciarius. Everybody knows all that. What this book does is takes that very familiar story and then inverts a lot of it. It completely upsets most of your expectations of it. For the
most part, the Space Wolves are the bad guys.
They very much are. Which is a
fascinating way of doing it.
It really is. The worst you can say of Magnus and the Thousand Sons is that they are blinded by their arrogance, and that is definitely the case. That is definitely, if they have a flaw, it's hubris. But you know what? Even their hubris is motivated by the very best of intentions. Magnus and the Thousand Sons, they are idealists. even above and beyond the Emperor and the people who are working to create this new imperium, this new regime of man, they are idealists. What they want is to tame the warp. What they want is for humanity to ascend, and they think that they can guide humanity to this metaphysical ascendance so that human beings become the ultimate masters of the warp and thereby become something else. They become something beyond human, and they believe that the Emperor represents this. So that's what they're aspiring to do. They want to help. They want humanity to be better than it is. But it just so happens that they may be blinded by that ambition, by that desire. And the universe itself, as it's set up, defies that ambition.
Yeah.
It's really sad. It's really sad. And when you finally come to the raising of Prospero, which is brilliantly told, by the way, it's a part of the background most people are intimately familiar with, but you get to go right into detail about civilization on Prospero, on what its people are like and what its buildings and cities and civilizations are like. And it is probably the most advanced, peaceful, cultured civilization in the entire Imperium. It's what the raising of Prospero, what the writer tries to echo is the raising of the Library of Alexandria. It's the fall of Arcadia. It's Constantinople. It's Atlantis. It's all of these historical and mythical destructions of civilizations in the name of ignorance and barbarity, and it's horrific. It's genuinely horrific because you have spent time not only with the Thousand Sons but with the people of Prospero. There are lots of remembrances in this book too. Lots of human characters.
I love the Rememberers.
Me too.
There's
and the ones
such a wonderful way of getting into this unknowable, really sci-fi setting, but still keeping everything very, very human. All the way through. What's it called? Brain has just gone blank.
You just lost that, didn't you?
It really did. That's not fair.
Which one was it? What was it about?
Oh, this is ridiculous. Oh, I've actually forgotten the Primarch's name.
I think Zeech just reached into your brain.
It really did.
And
one second. I'm just going to put something in place here so I can see this. He goes freaking out, little Horus. He goes off with the demons in the middle of the warp, and he sees the original Primarchs being born, and he sees the Chaos Gods take them. Yes. What's it called?
The book. I cannot remember the book in which that occurs, but that does occur in The Last Heretic.
Last Heretic, thank you.
Yeah,
that's the one. Right.
It's not Horus Axelmand who does that. It's actually Argel Tal.
It is. It's
Argel Tal. And in fact, now that you mention it, The Last Heretic is another one of my absolute favourites.
The Last Heretic is... It's
the
something
Last
to be read to be believed.
Yeah, The Last Heretic is one of those books, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not just a good Black Library book, it's actually a really good book, full stop. It's beautifully written, and it's one of those, like a lot of the really good books from the Black Library, it goes into very great detail, not only into the history of this universe, but the metaphysics of the universe. If you want to understand where the heresy began and why, you need to understand that you need to read this book. And you also need to read it to understand the metaphysical dynamics of this universe, because you learn it. You learn it as the Primarch Lorgar and his legion learn it, in all innocence in many respects. They don't go out expecting to topple their father's work. That's not what they intend. The word bearers are portrayed in this book as considered metaphysicians and scholars, not as fanatics, not as mindlessly authoritarian slaves who bow down and worship anything they can find. That's not the case at all. Although that is how they've been portrayed up until this point. Again, another really good example of how these books invert expectation. In fact, up until reading this book, I hated the word bearers.
Yes.
I hated them.
Same. Yeah.
I hated them. They represent, in the way they're portrayed in the general background, they represent everything I hate in humanity. You know, there's this ideological extremism, dogmatism, the imposition and enshrinement of absolute ideals. Everything I loathe. That's not what they're about. Not at this point. That's not what they're about. They are portrayed as considered metaphysicians who are seeking after truth, meaning, and poetry in a universe that is set to defy it. That's what they're doing. And when there are these wonderful moments, as Adam was just describing, where there is a sort of a subgroup of word bearers who are sent into the Eye of Terror. It isn't called the Eye of Terror at this point. It's just a big warp storm, you know?
Yeah.
But Lorgar sends them in. And by all accounts, they are lost in that storm, but from their own perspective, for centuries.
Yeah.
A long, long time. And while they're there, something very peculiar happens. I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's a moment in the background that's very, very key, where the Primarchs are scattered from beneath the Emperor's purview. They're actually taken from him at their moment of gestation and scattered across the universe. You find out how that happens in this book. It's a part of the background that's never been that detailed before. You never know really how it happens. Here you do, and you find out who's responsible for it as well. Mm-hmm. And that is really fascinating. It's really fascinating. You find out that it's actually a bit of a paradox.
Yes.
It's really bizarre. And you get a real sense of how atemporal the Chaos Powers are, how they perceive things outside of linear time. It's not a case of cause and effect for them. You get a perspective on how truly divine they actually are, the extent of their power. But you also get a look at what the word bearers are about. I mean, these guys, when the ones that survive, not many of them do, by the way, the ones that come back, they are changed. Mm-hmm. They're changed profoundly, and they know the truth. They actually know about the metaphysics of this universe. And what I love, there is this conversation between Lorgar and Argeltal. And Argeltal is one of the word bearers who is sent into the warp. And they talk about the metaphysics. They talk about the warp. They talk about the chaos powers. They talk about how the warp works. And they're not happy about it. Neither of them are happy about it. This is not the truth that Argeltal or Lorgar wanted. They didn't want to hear this. They did not want to hear that the most extreme and negative aspects of humanity are the very source of everything that is most legitimately divine in the warp. But that's the truth. That's the truth of the matter. And although they don't like it, they accept it.
Yep, because it is the truth.
It's the truth.
And that is exactly what the word bearers wanted to know.
Exactly. I mean, if anything is the case, really, the Horus Heresy is a misnomer. It's not the Horus Heresy. If anything, it's the Lorgarian Heresy.
Yeah, he's the one who started the dominoes falling.
Absolutely, he is. And in many respects, Horus is a patsy. Mm-hmm. That's another thing that these books have set up, which really surprises me. Horus is a figurehead. He's not the puppet master. He is not the one who is orchestrating this. No. If anything, he's a puppet. He's a puppet. Characters such as Erebus, who is entirely hateful. Entirely hateful. If there is a villain in the Horus Heresy books, if there is an out-and-out villain, it's Erebus. Our Dark Apostle Erebus, who is one of the... he is one of the chaplains of the word bearers who, after their corruption, goes from legion to legion, planting these seeds of sedition. establishing these forbidden warrior cults within the legions that are used to slowly and insidiously corrupt them towards heresy. And he is the one who eventually introduces Horus to the powers of chaos, and he presents him with the choice of turning on the Emperor.
Yeah.
But Horus is a dupe.
Yeah.
They play on Horus's uncertainty, on his fear, and on his relationship with his father. I mean, ultimately, Horus feels betrayed. What's established in Horus Rising is that Horus feels betrayed. He feels as though the Emperor has abandoned the crusade, has left him with an impossible task, with coordinating all for his brothers, for one thing, and his brothers are very difficult to coordinate in and of themselves because a lot of them hate one another. They're constantly fighting. They all have their own problems and issues to deal with, and they often all go off and do their own things. That's very clear. You read about Lionel Johnson in some of the books. He does his own thing. He does not follow orders. Even Robert Gilman does his own thing. Magnus goes off and
Secundus, for example.
Absolutely, Imperium Secundus. Magnus is off doing his own esoteric thing. Fulgrim off doing his own thing. All of them. It's like herding cats. And this is the job that Horus has been given, and this is before you even factor in all of the far-flung worlds that the Imperium has brought under its purview, all of the what will become the Titanicus legions. Before you've got the Adeptus Mechanicus, you've got the what will become the Imperial Guard regiments, or the Imperial Navy and Army. All of these things he has got to coordinate. He is the War Master, and it's too much. It's too much for him. It should never have fallen to one guy. It should never have fallen to one guy. It was either a mistake on the Emperor's part, or it was something he intended.
I always say it's something he intended.
I think you have to look at it like that. I don't think there's any other argument, because if you look at it the other way and it was something he didn't intend, then he's an idiot. He is. Yeah. It conflicts massively with his portrayal as this semi-divine being who has been alive for centuries, who has seen all this. He knows more about humanity than any other entity alive, because he has seen more or less all of human history and has precipitated and orchestrated a hell of a lot of it. It does not chime with that character for him to be that stupid, to be that ignorant of the consequences of his actions. The same is true with regards to his actions towards Lorgar and towards Magnus the Red, and towards Mortarion and Angron. All of those Primarchs who are driven to heresy. It seems as though the Emperor does something towards them that sparks it. There's a particular encounter, or there's a particular event that pushes them over the edge. And I can only regard it as deliberate.
Yes, it is. I will not argue that point. It is. So, we've been going for a little while here, so I've got a question.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
And that is, first of all, can you name all of the book titles you've mentioned?
Horus Rising, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames, Arhiman Sorcerer, Arhiman Exile, Arhiman Exodus, Arhiman Unchanged, 1,000 Suns, Prospero Burns, The Last Heretic.
That's it. You've.
I think that's all of them. Storm of Iron.
Storm of Iron, of course. Yeah.
That's all of them.
So that's all the ones that you would recommend for somebody to get into.
I would unambiguously recommend this. But then again, it does depend on what you like. It depends on what you're interested in.
I'm thinking as a way of getting into the universe as a whole. I think that's a very good lead-in. I think what
those
you've
are very good. Yeah. And in particular, out of that lot, if you're going for a lead into the universe, Horus Rising, Last Heretic.
Yes, completely.
Those are the ones you want to read, and from there, lots will blossom. You will want to go out and read more. You'll definitely want to read Betrayer, about the Word Bearers and the World Eaters. You will definitely want to read that book. You'll definitely want to read all of the books about the Sons of Horus, and you will certainly want to read about the Thousand Sons as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I've got something I really want to go into now.
Please feel free. I think I've waffled on for long enough there.
I'm really looking forward to. And that is, I've got a two-part conversation to start off.
Okay.
The first up is that the Warhammer world. Mm-hmm. If you're wanting to get into the Warhammer world, it's a little bit difficult, stroke really easy right now.
Yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? Because it
is. Because
where do you want to start?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to actually go back into the Warhammer world and learn of it all, or do you want to go through into Age of Sigmar and get started there? So I've split this into two parts, and I've got a very simple way of doing it. If you want to get into the Warhammer world as it is now, Age of Sigmar is definitely where you need to start to go. And that is going to be 2 books. Mm-hmm. One is called Pestilence. Pestilence is the story of a group of Skaven who have kidnapped a city.
Yeah.
The city is attached to a gigantic worm, this giant, foul, bile-encrusted creature that is so large that the human population of the city have funneled out the spikes and the hairs on its back and made towers out of them.
Brilliant.
It's that big.
That's an awesome concept. I love it.
It gets better. Because there are two separate Skaven clans, both from Clan Pestilence, who they both have the same patron, being a demon, a vermin lord, who is getting them both to do his bidding, whilst also getting them to turn on each other on a fairly regular basis, so they can all find the Book of Plagues, which is an old Nurgle artifact from the old Warhammer days. So that's actually survived. It survived and is kicking about.
Excellent.
The story progresses along as the human-ish characters, the Stormcast, appear to try and take back the city, and then the Lizardmen, the Seraphon, turn up, and you start to get an idea of how the Skaven mind works, how the cold inhumanity of the Stormcast, and what the hell the Seraphon are.
Yeah.
Until this point, I didn't get what the Seraphon were.
It's difficult to pin down, isn't it, exactly what they are now?
It is, because in the book, throughout their Warhammer armies, their battle tome, they are memories that are stored in basically spaceships that are then dropped onto Earth when they need to be used.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the characters is a Cold One, which is a giant leader, lizard man. And he remembers every death he's had.
Right.
So he's alive. He's just got a body like a demon's. It's made of starlight. So when they die, they explode into starlight and go back up into the heavens. In the same way that the Stormcast die, lightning goes up into the sky.
God, that's a really interesting way of moving them on from being just the lizard men, isn't it?
It really is.
Wow.
So there's a skink who's a little tiny lizard man, and he is the voice for the Slan, because the Slan can't speak. They can speak, but it would take a couple of 100 years for you to listen to what they have to say.
Yes, because they're more or less immortal, aren't they? So it takes a long time for anything to happen.
Yeah, much like the Ents. They are big, slimy Ents. And you see from the skink's point of view that he knows exactly what's going to happen here. When he dies, he'll go back up. But he doesn't care, because he can't die. Even when he dies, he can't die.
Yeah, wow.
Whilst the Cold One, the warrior, he remembers dying, but doesn't remember getting here.
Oh.
So there's different layers of memory that the Slan are letting them have.
Right.
It is a lot of really interesting stuff, and all this is taking place on the back of a giant worm.
Wow, I really like that. That's such cool concepts, you know?
Well, this is how Age of Sigmar works. It's smacking the concept as hard as possible, but also keeping a lot of really interesting fantasy going underneath it.
Yeah, like high fantasy stuff as well. It's high concept, isn't it? I mean, it's a far cry from what you actually got in the fiction of the old world, to be honest. Yeah, because the old world is much more grounded. Although it was a fantasy world, it's much more grounded in a kind of historical setting, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it was Middle Ages Europe.
Yeah,
all the way through. But we'll get to
Whereas
that very
AOS
shortly.
is prog rock album cover.
Oh, it is, and it's beautiful. I love it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do miss the old world, but nothing. Those books haven't gone away.
No,
I can still read them, so that's fine by me.
absolutely, yeah.
It's just a different world.
And I
that's
prefer
fine.
the realms. I've got to say, I prefer the realms.
I love the realms. The realms are amazing. But a really cool thing about this is it gets into Gyrol, the realm of life, and explains a lot of what the realm of life is. Because in the way it's been discussed in the past, you get the idea of lots of vegetation, lots of rivers, but it's not just that. There's other stuff going on here. For example, when the Skaven die, there is this foul ichor that comes out of them, and this rot starts to spread through the grass. But then the grass fights back.
Right.
Pushing the rot back into the body, and then the body is consumed and just taken away, and it's just devoured under the mud. And it's like, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. It fights back against the corruption, which is why Nurgle wanted it. Makes sense.
Right. Because there is an ongoing war, isn't there, between Alariel and Nurgle for dominance of Giran.
Well, yeah. Do you know why Nurgle's doing that war? Do you know what the catalyst for it is?
Does he have like a specific agenda?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right. What is it?
He wants Ariel to notice him.
No.
He's got a crush
really?
on Ariel.
Is that what's that is brilliant.
That's what started it.
That is absolutely brilliant. He's got a thing for the life goddesses, doesn't he?
He does.
He's definitely got a thing for the life goddesses. I love that.
Yeah,
that is fantastic.
The entire reason why Ariel was reborn after she died when Age of Sigmar kicked off. It was because he wanted her as his bride and sent some people to go and give her his blessings and his love. Now, of course, this being Nurgle, you know what that is, don't you?
Absolutely, yes.
So I always thought this is a really cool book, and it got me interested. You got the appetite whet.
Yeah, I want to read that now.
Oh, it's great.
I want to read it because I love the imagery. I think the imagery is great.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's when you're going through it. I mean, it's not the greatest of written books.
No.
But the ideas are so good that whenever the dialogue gets a bit clunky, I don't really care.
I mean, that does seem to be more of a problem with the fantasy-based books, doesn't it, as opposed to the science fiction ones, because the science fiction ones seem to be set more in a more historically viable world. Because essentially the characters, although they can talk a little bit highfalutin, they tend to talk a little bit like we do.
Yes.
A little bit more naturalistically than what ho thou evil villain.
Yeah. But I mean, there isn't a huge amount of well, there is actually, but that's done on purpose in a different book. But it's a lot of trying to get a lot of these big fantasy words out in the middle of sentences, and that's always been a struggle. There's no easy way of doing it, and to be honest, I don't think you need to do it very often.
No.
But this led into another book, The City of Secrets, which I have spoken about multiple times, but I do think if you want to get into the Age of Sigmar world, this is one that's worth reading, because the concept behind it is so goddamn brilliant. For those of you who don't know what I'm going to talk about here, it's set in a city, which is prophecy is both a drug and a currency. So,
love it.
Oh, it is such an amazing idea, where you have people on the streets who are begging for minutes.
That's so cool.
So they can see a few minutes into the future, so they can see what will happen and change and make a different direction to the one that they've seen. You've got people who are trading their foresight to other people. You're trading foresight for up to 2 years away, so somebody can see that for goods. It's full of all these wondrous things, and the reason for that is it's built on top of a Zentian temple, an artifact.
Of course, so would be Zetian. It would be.
Oh yeah. So all that is leaking out, which is actually it's being turned into these little glass globes and things. It's mechanized. Mechanized Zench power.
That is brilliant. So you've actually got a Zetian civilization.
Yeah. but
that works.
Yeah, but it's not chaotic.
It works.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really interesting. It falls apart when the bad guys all turn up, but it's
word, wouldn't it? But
But there's a concept, and what it is basically, at its core, it's a detective story. It's a guy who is, and this is one of the reasons I love it, because every other book in Age of Sigmar up until this point has been the anvil being hit as hard as possible. It has been the Stormcast and their heroes and heroic adventures.
Yeah, it's war, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
grand
only
adventure.
the faithful, that type of thing. But this is a guy he's been in the town guard for 3 weeks.
Right.
And he is then framed. And he and what is basically a AOS Inquisitor, a witch hunter, trying to get to the bottom of why he was framed. What did he see? What does he know? But he doesn't know what he knows.
Interesting.
And it is a brilliant way of doing ground level AOS.
Yeah,
Seeing the Stormcast from ground level is terrifying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, seeing them as the almighty heroes in all of their books, it's that you forget that they are meant to be quite scary. They are monstrous. Yeah, you see it from this guy's point of view, and he comes up to like the belly button on one of these guys, and he's just looking up at this thing. This Stormcast is just this giant, haughty creature that looks at him like he is nothing.
Yeah.
And I cannot recommend that book enough. It is fantastic.
Right, I'm definitely going to pick both of those up. Definitely, because I really like the sound of that. I mean, I imagine this would be a very good way, as you said, of getting into AOS on the ground level, because part of the problem with AOS is because it is a relatively new system. It's difficult to get a bead on sometimes. It's difficult to get a bead on like exactly what is happening or what the status of this universe actually is.
Yeah, it is. It's because certain things aren't fleshed out yet. The realms themselves are still a little bit...
They're inchoate, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're still very much in flux.
Yeah, I mean, the Realm of Death is one that I really want to try and get my teeth into to try and work out what it is. Because
absolutely.
They mention there's just people. There are just people living there.
Yeah, so I understand. There are like kingdoms in the Realm of Death.
Yeah.
It's I can imagine... I mean, from what I understand from reading the earlier background about what Nagash got up to when he he slipped through into the realms, he went through all of the underworlds of various mythologies and killed and devoured their gods of death, and became the ultimate god of death. So now all underworlds, anywhere where, apart from the ones that are ruled by the chaos gods, where dead people go, where dead souls collect, they're under his purview now. They're under his jurisdiction. So I can imagine... Sorry, go on.
No, you carry on.
I can imagine the realm of death being massive.
Yes.
I mean, being massively expansive, but largely being structured like certain mythological underworlds. So maybe like Hades... maybe one of them is a bit like Dante's Inferno's Hell. Yeah. Something like that.
There's one of the audiobooks, and I can't remember which it is. It's Stormcast meet von Karsten, and they go hunting for Nagash.
It's
the hunt.
Is this
for
Vlad
Nagash.
von Karstein?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because Vlad does not like him.
Yeah, it's actually called the Hunt for Nagash.
Right.
And when they get to the Realm of Death, it's a little bit... They don't get into it, because it's all underground and caverns and things.
Yeah.
So they're not actually seeing the entirety of the realm. But when Nagash turns up, he is absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. He is just... There's two words I want to use, and I'm not going to use them because they are disgusting words, but when it comes to Nagash, it's the only way to describe him. He is absolutely unstoppable, and he hates the Stormcast. Hates them because they keep dying, and they don't come to him.
Yeah. So there is a definite tension there between Nagash and Sigmar, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. And it's beautiful. So
essentially, Sigmar has stepped on his toes. Yeah. That's his realm. That's his purview, and Sigmar has taken that away from him.
And and so he keeps one of the Stormcast in a flux between life and death.
That's cruel.
In a little jar. So
I like that.
So yeah, the City of Secrets and Pestilence are the two I would recommend to get into Age of Sigmar. If you want to go back, though, into Warhammer Fantasy Battle itself, I cannot recommend anything more than the Felix and Gotrek saga.
The Felix and Gotrek books. So right back to the very beginning. Then.
Oh, yes. I mean,
some of the very earliest books that were ever released.
Yep, they
from
were.
Games Workshop.
Some of the earliest books and some of the last. Because those books end just as the Warhammer world end.
Yeah.
They actually end with...
cool.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful because I like to think of Felix and Gotrek being the history of the Warhammer world.
Yeah, the bookends.
Yeah, they are. They start off very much in 80s Games Workshop Warhammer, right up to the point where everything ends. I mean, they go through 3 authors to do it, but...
they would. They would.
I think there's 12 books.
God, really? Is there that many?
Let me just double check. I will tell you in just a moment.
That is amazing.
Right, so there is Troll Slayer by William King, Skaven Slayer by William King, Demon Slayer by William King, Dragon Slayer by William King, Beast Slayer by William King, Vampire Slayer by William King. Oh, and Giant Slayer by William King. So that's the 7 that are the William King ones, which are very pulpy, very fast, very easy to read, very fun, really fun.
Yeah.
Then Nathan Long takes over from that point, and you have Orc Slayer, Man Slayer, Elf Slayer, Shaman Slayer, Zombie Slayer.
Sounds like a pattern here, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yeah. Then that pattern breaks with Josh Reynolds' The Road of Skulls, David Gilmer's City of the Damned, Josh Reynolds' The Serpent Queen, then back with Kinslayer by David Geimer, and then Slayer by David Geimer.
Yeah.
Which is August 1997, right the way through to May 2015. And that doesn't include all 17 short stories, the anthology, The Lost Tales, The Myths and Legends, the audio drama, Slayer of the Storm God, or the spin-off books of Bloodborne by Nathan Long, Bloodforged by Nathan Long, Bloodsworn by Nathan Long, and the 3.5 Thankwall books by C.L. Werner.
The Thankwall books. Yes, of course, because Gotrek and Felix have a particular thing with Thankwall, don't they?
Well, Thankwall thinks they do. They just keep accidentally stopping his plans.
They just happen to be around, don't they, when he's doing something nefarious.
How many times do Felix and Gotrek meet Thankwall? Any ideas?
No idea.
Twice.
Is that all?
Yeah.
That's really funny because from his perspective, they're marketed as his arch enemies.
Yes. Yes, they are. But they only come face to face twice. Once in Nuln, and then the second time where he's lost everything and he just comes at them and say, "You who have destroyed me, you who have done all of this to me." And Felix is like, Do we know each other?
Do I know you?
Have we met before?
It may be a bit of a racist thing or a speciesist thing. Maybe all Skaven look the same to Felix.
Yeah, because most of the time, like when Thankwall tries to steal the dwarf's Zeppelin, right? That happens in the background.
Yeah,
because he's a Skaven, he doesn't go into the fight. He stays in the background and tries to unload it.
Of course.
So Felix and Gotrek don't ever actually know he's there.
Poor Thankwall.
Yeah, I love Thankwall. He's close to my heart.
I'd assume you got the End Times book.
Yes. Yeah.
It's good, isn't it?
They hit Illustria with
the new
moon.
miniature. Yeah, of course. The new miniature of Thankwall and Bone Ripper.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful.
Brilliant. I love his warpstone horns.
Yes.
I loved that. I thought that was a fantastic little motif for the character.
I wish that the Clan Skiri battle tome would just get out, because I want a Skiri army.
It will eventually.
It will. So
I mean,
So
fabulous.
sorry, I think we've got a little bit of a delay going on here.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
So that's the Felix and Gotrek books. Now, how do you describe the Felix and Gotrek books? So, it's the story of a dwarf, a slayer, Gotrek Gurnisson, who has done something in his past where he feels he cannot ever be forgiven. So he shaves his head, becomes a slayer, and goes off to find a noble death. In death, his crime will be forgiven. Felix is a rich, womanizing, drunken poet who has a history of making terrible mistakes and should have really been a merchant. However, he was saved during the window tax riots in Altdorf, got absolutely wrecked on Dwarven Ale, and swore a blood oath with Gotrek to record his doom. When he sobered up, they were 400 miles away from Altdorf, and he had no shoes. But what's quite cool is, over time, you start to see Felix and Gotrek are friends. There is a gulf of difference between them. I mean, Gotrek is an unknowable. Being a dwarf, he is totally unknowable to Felix. But there is a lot of respect between the two. And when things start to happen where you start to think, hang on, how are they still alive? Not just because they keep doing these fights, but they have been going for this long. When that question gets brought up, the answer is a very interesting one. And as I say, as much as they start off very, very pulpy, Trollslayer is a collection of short stories that William King wrote over 10 years. You know, they went into White Dwarf, went into the Warhammer Fantasy Battle, all that roleplay and all that type of thing. And then the second one was actually two short stories he'd written, and then he wrote another load of short stories to go around them.
So a bit of an obsession for him, yeah.
It's a weird one, because at the same time he was doing the Space Wolves books.
Yeah.
And then after that, he starts writing them properly as full books, and they do get... There is a point where you're just going, oh, come on.
Yeah.
There is nothing bigger than what you've just killed.
They cannot go any... I mean, I think it's like Dragon Slayer, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, at that point, I mean, you have to go God tier then, don't you?
Well, no, what they do is they bring it back down again.
They bring it back down, yeah.
Beast Slayer is Beast Slayer because it's an entire Chaos Horde.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, Beast Slayer is the beginnings of the end times.
Right, that's where it starts. Yeah.
It was released in September 2000.
Right. So about the time when they would have been laying the groundwork for
something that happened
times.
15 years. Well, 12 years later, 13 years later. How weird's that? And then the Vampire Slayer, it becomes a bit more of a personal death. Giant Slayer, back to the big. Orc Slayer goes weird. Manslayer is fun. Elf Slayer is odd. And it just keeps going like that. And it just... Nathan Long finds different ways of doing stuff. I do kind of miss William King's style of writing when Nathan Long takes over.
The pulpier style,
funny. It's really easy to read, great fun.
Very 1980s,
It's beautiful. But it's also very 1980s. Funny. That's the thing that I really like about them. They are really funny. Another one for Warhammer Fantasy Battle world, the old world, is one called Silver Nails. Now,
Silver Nails.
We talked about this guy a while back, actually. Jack Yeovil, or also known as Kim Newman.
Ah, yes.
Because Kim Newman had an idea for a fantasy book, and somehow people let him write it. Because this is the story of Filthy Harold and Dickon of Green Dock. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's a pastiche of Dixon of Dock Green involving werewolves in Altdorf.
Awesome.
And that's a brilliant one. So there you go. So that's the ones I wanted to bring out and talk about a little bit. The Slayer series I can't recommend enough. They are so much fun. Even if the world has gone away, they are just perfect examples of the old world.
quite a lot of variety in that series as well, because you have obviously a very long-running series that runs through different incarnations of Games Workshop, through decades, with various different writers adding to it. So that would be interesting in and of itself to make almost like a study of.
Yes, I think it would. Actually, that's not a bad idea.
To see how the style has changed and the kind of fiction, how even the world has evolved and transformed over time.
You've given me an interesting idea there. I might just do that. And the last thing I was going to bring up... Actually, no, before I do that. The Slayer series, Silver Nails, and of course, if you know me, Drakenfels.
Yeah,
everyone must read Drakenfels. It is fantastic. And then from Age of Sigmar, Pestilence and City of Secrets.
But those two I'm definitely going to get.
But there is something else I wanted to mention. Because it's not just books that you can read about the 40k and fantasy universes. There's also some comics.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of comics, actually.
And I'm going to mention 3 of them, because I think these 3 are exactly what a Games Workshop comic should be. Now, they're all 40k, which is a bit of a shame, but...
They get the 40k comics are better.
They are a lot better. So the first one is Blood Quest.
It's fantastic. It's a really good series.
Yeah, well, this is what I mean. It's not that it's a good Warhammer comic. This is a good comic.
It's a good comic.
All 3 of these are
good
comics. The idea of this is that a Blood Angels captain, Leonatus, was given a weapon called the Sword of Belerius. It's a... Shall we just call it the magic MacGuffin for this?
Yeah.
It was nicked by an orc, which made Leonatus become dishonoured and then exiled. So he and his team, his loyal soldiers, travel the universe to try and get this sword back.
All a ragtag band of misfits they are as well.
Yeah, they are. And this quest takes them through an orc warg and right into the Eye of Terror. Mm-hmm. And it always upsets me that it never got made into a film, because it was going to, and they started work on making it into a movie, but it never ever got made.
Never came off, did it? It would have made a very good film, actually. Yeah. It is very filmic anyway.
It is massively cinematic.
I like the art style as well. I mean, one of the things about the comics that were produced by Games Workshop is that there's lots of people who have worked on 2000 AD.
Oh, yes.
So the artwork is very familiar to a lot of people, and it works so well for this universe. That style of art works so well.
I'm so glad you mentioned the 2000 AD style of art, because that's where I'm going next.
Aha!
Kev Walker, Gordon Rennie, and Cal Richardson's Demon Fuge.
That's stunning. That's another really good series. Nuns with guns.
Yeah, Nuns, Guns, and Gasoline. It's... How do you even begin? So... we discover that there was a Sister of Battle. She was the sole survivor of 12,000 from a slaughter that happened on the planet Parnis that was there to destroy a demonic infestation. An Inquisitor, Silas Hand, comes to see if she has been tainted by chaos, and that's why she survived. But she isn't. She's actually 100% pure. Mm-hmm. But the Inquisitor doesn't believe this. And it's the story of her, the Inquisitor, and a troop of Sisters of Battle going off to try and work out what happened.
Yeah.
It looks like a dream that goes into a nightmare at times.
There's some real good imagery in Demonifuge. Some really lovely imagery.
It looks just... There's no words to describe it. It does look dreamlike. Everything is very Baroque. It's very... almost medieval in its stylings. But it's all space battles, and it's just beautiful. And I can't recommend it enough.
No, it's a good comic. It's a really excellent comic. Again, it feels like one of those old-fashioned 2000 AD running stories that you used to get in sort of like the late 1980s to the mid 1990s. That's what it feels like.
It feels like Nemesis, if Nemesis was slain.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can describe it.
If that makes any sense. There's a lot of cross-pollination going on there, but yeah.
And then finally, Titan.
Oh, yeah, I remember Titan.
Titan is the story of one of the warlord-class Titans used by the Imperium.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who is... how do you call it? The guy who is connected to the Titan, the commander of the Titan.
Princeps.
Yeah, he dies of a heart attack. And so they grab somebody who isn't ready and just stick him in the machine. And he discovers that the ghost of the commanders stay within the Titan. They are the ghost in the machine. And he has to learn how to use it. It's very pulpy. It's just action all the way. But when you start to realize how big these things are, especially when they're fighting the Tyranid creatures, they are, it is beautiful to view. It is absolutely gorgeous.
I do remember the issues where they fought the Tyranids, because you got a lot of the big bio titans like the Haruspecs and whatnot knocking about, which was beautifully recorded, really well rendered. Titan, and I think Titan's just had a re-release as well, so get out there and get that one. So there's my 3 comics. Wow, that was a good list, just generally, and a massively extensive list.
So I'm hoping that all of you guys out there have written all of that down, because
there was a lot. There will be a pop quiz, I'm afraid.
I will try and write all these down when the show comes out. And then finally, we've got a couple of messages from people on the group who have their own things. Not many. You guys have disappointed me. I wanted more. Stuart Murray says, anyone here who was expecting me to say Xenos would only be partly wrong. Xenos is the start of my favourite book series, and it's not a giant battle. But I always wanted someone to start with Space Wolf by William King. That way they can learn about the 40k universe at the same time Ragnar does. That's quite a cool idea.
Yeah. That is a good idea. And maybe a little bit more of a sympathetic look at the Space Wolves as well, from anything we've mentioned.
Well, yeah, there's good ones and bad ones.
Yeah.
Leave Prospero alone. I love Space Wolves.
There are no good Space Wolves. I hate the Space Wolves.
There are no wolves on Fenris. Yes, there are. Look at them. Look, right there.
No, there aren't.
Christopher Carlson says, well, this comic is a pretty easy read. It's just about badasses fighting Tyranids in the snow. And that's a comic called Lone Wolf. And then finally, we've got some questions.
Okay.
So Christopher Carlson has 2 questions. And one is, how does the schedule for non-Games Workshop episodes look? Because you did say something about Dungeons and Dragons when this started.
Yeah.
Schedule? What's the schedule?
I was going to say schedule. I don't think we've got one. We tend to just do what we want.
Yes.
That's how it seems to work. And I think that's how this podcast is best, to be honest. I think it works so much better when everybody's relaxed and everybody's just sort of lounging around and just talking about stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
To be honest. But I'm well up for broadening the range a little bit. I wouldn't mind talking about some role-playing games in the future, or expanding into board games or something like that.
What I would like to do, I think, and I haven't discussed this with George yet, so this is like the first time mentioning it. What I'd like to do for our first non-Games Workshop episode is actually the history of Warcraft. I know a guy that I would like to get in for that, because I think that would be quite a good one to do, because I don't know how connected you are to the history of Warcraft, Mr. George.
Not at all.
Right.
I don't know a great deal.
When you get into the world of Warcraft, it gets a bit fuzzy and But when you go from Warcraft 1, 2 to 3, and then finish with 3, there is a lot of really interesting lore in there that I love to bits. The rise of Thrall, the side of the Alliance that isn't nice. These aren't good guys. They are selfish. They are miserable. What caused the rise of the Burning Legion, the orcs being kept in concentration camps. All of this stuff is brilliant. When you start to realize what the orcs are and what they have become and why they've become that, the betrayal of Gul'dan and all that type of thing. It's really interesting stuff. So it's something I'd like to get into, and I think
that would be an educational one for me.
Well, it's most of the people that we get in usually sit there blinking into the sunlight going, oh, what? Yeah. But then again, say if we did a D&D one, that would be very educational for me, because I don't know a huge amount about the D&D worlds outside of the bare essentials.
No, I mean, I must admit, I came to the actual game world like kind of late on, so I know a lot now because I've read the books and everything. But yeah, it's interesting. It will be very interesting, that I think.
I mean, my D&D lore is the Dragons books, the Autumn, Twilight, Winter, Sun, Gooseberry Bush,
and presumably the 1980s cartoon too.
Oh yes, of course, yes.
Which has got very little to do with the actual gaming world, to be perfectly honest.
Why
very
they didn't just hit Uni in the head with a plank of wood and roast it, I do not know.
There is an unofficial ending to that series.
Is there?
You know how they... Yeah, you know how they never got home?
Yeah.
The whole thing was about them trying to get home from the D&D world, essentially. Yeah. If you ever play Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Arm, which is it's a D&D game. There's a shop in the city of Arm, the city of coin, that you can go into, and if you hover the cursor around the walls, there is a portrait of... It's supposed to be a portrait, but it's actually a still from the cartoon of Bobby the Barbarian. And if you hover your cursor over it, the text appears that says, a tapestry depicting a barbarian boy from another world, believed to have been devoured by the dragon Tiamat.
Oh, that's good.
So there you go.
That's very good.
That is the unofficial ending of those adventurers from another world. They got eaten by Tiamat.
You just reminded me of the Dragon's Graveyard.
I love that episode.
Yeah, Tiamat still gives the chills.
Although, the way they portray Tiamat in the cartoon is not how she is in the actual world. She's not a dragon, she's a goddess.
Yeah.
She is a dragon. I mean, she is a dragon. In fact, the look is absolutely right. That is what she looks like. But she is the goddess of like the negative dragons, the chromatic dragons.
Yeah. Actually, there's what.
If we got into that, this would go for another couple of hours.
Well, that's one thing about the idea of doing a History of Warcraft one. It has to be very careful, because it's very easy to get sidetracked into what the dragons are. They're elemental gods.
As it is in almost every mythology that involves dragons, quite frankly.
Yeah. He also asks, but to get back onto topic, best start collecting box. And he wants one for both AOS and 40k. I think the best start collecting box for AOS, in all honesty, I think it's the Iron Jaws.
The Iron Jaws. For 40k... I think the best start collecting box. It's very difficult, actually, because it depends on what you want. Yeah. It depends on what you want. I mean, I would be tempted to say the Chaos Space Marine one, but it's not, because the Chaos Space Marine one, unfortunately, is full of loads of old models, which is a real shame. The Eldar ones are good.
Yes.
The Eldar ones are really good, actually, and the Necron ones are good.
Yes, that's true.
And all the Demon ones are excellent.
Well, actually, I was going to say the Demons of Zench one is probably...
I've just got that.
That's
it's really good. It's good value for money. It's got beautiful sprues, not just for like assembling the miniatures, but just as bits.
Yeah.
If you just want to get it for conversions, it's absolutely wonderful. I'm currently in the process of combining the flamers from it with Exalted Sorcerers to make my coven for my Shattered Suns, Thousand Suns Space Marines.
I'm trying to think which one it is. The Malignant Undead one is pretty damn good, just because you get the Terrorgeist with all the different options. And you do get a lot of skeletons. Like that. And if you're clever, you can actually double the amount of skeletons you get in that pack.
Yeah. If you're very clever with how you assemble them,
if you have some of them coming out of graves, ding ding.
Yes, they're very forgiving in that way, aren't they? Skeletons,
they really are.
In fact, the undead in general are quite forgiving in that regard. After
that, I can't think of any others.
All of the demons ones are excellent.
Yes, they are. They are.
All of the demons
It
ones are good.
upsets me that there isn't one for the Caradron Overlords yet.
There will be,
and that's why I haven't bought them yet.
There will be.
I'm not buying them until that comes out.
Yeah, there will be, and it will be excellent value for money, I'm sure, because they all have been. I have to say they've knocked off a significant amount from the price.
Well, you think about you usually get one big creature in it, and that big creature is going to be between 30 and 40 quid, and the Star Collecting box is 50 quid.
Yeah, it's decent. It's well priced.
It's ridiculously good value for money. He also asks what the worst one is, and there I don't know actually.
Chaos Space Marines, I'm sad to say. I mean, I love the Chaos Space Marines. They're my favourite, and it's not a fault of the box set. It's a fault of the fact that the miniature range hasn't been updated in donkey's years. So you've got those really old Chaos Space Marines that are not very good. You've got the old Rhino. You've got the new Dreadnought, the new Hellbrute, which is actually a phenomenal kit. It's one of my favourites in all of 40k. That's good, but you may as well just go and buy the Hellbrute.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, it's not a very good set.
The Seraphon, actually. The Seraphon Star Collecting, because the Skinks and the Lizardmen have not been updated in donkeys.
No, they have not.
And they look old.
Yeah, they do. They do look quite old.
When I was building them up, it felt old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
although I do feel sorry for Khorne players in that regard. I mean, they've still got those old Khorne Berserkers, which God knows. I mean, I was still in high school when they came out.
That's 20 years ago.
Yeah,
bloody hell.
It's a long time. They were one of the very earliest examples of those modular kits.
They were, yeah. Because they did them, and they did those original modular Space Marines.
That's right,
I loved those original modular Space Marines. They were so good.
I did too. They were very, very good kits. Well, they were based on the old RTB01, weren't they? The old Rogue Trader box sets. Because there was that horrible period in Second Ed where they just sold identical miniatures, just plastic box sets of completely identical, almost one-piece miniatures. And then you got in around Third Ed, you started to get these wonderful modular kits again.
Yeah, I love them.
Which has been the style since.
And I would love to get hold of that original Space Marine box set again.
Oh, the RTB01
just to have it, you know.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So many beaky heads. I love beaky heads.
Lots of beakies, lots of beakies.
Beakies are great.
I want one of the original Chaos Dreadnoughts, you know, the ones that's based on a snake.
Yeah.
I would love one of them. I would love one, but they're kind of tricky to find these days. And the Imperial version is even worse.
Yeah, you're not going to find one of them, I'm afraid.
You're not, no.
I'd love to get hold of the old Space Crusade Dreadnoughts again.
No, you might be okay with that. You may have to buy the entirety of Space Crusade.
I'm okay with that.
But you might be okay with that.
I'm okay with that idea. So I think we should get out of here, fella, because this has gone on for quite some time.
I think so. We've done all right there, I think. We haven't done too badly.
No, not at all. Is there anything you'd like to quickly pimp out then, my fine fellow?
Oh, yeah, as always, you can find my literature and fiction at www.strangeplaygrounds.com. There is now a new version of Strange Playgrounds out, if you'd like to go and buy that from my Amazon page. Ooh. Yeah, it's essentially the same book, it's just a reprint, republishing.
Right, okay.
You can also get a Mobi version of it, an ebook version of it. And there's also my new project, which is in confabulation with the photographer Nick Hardy, Born in Blood, which is going to be several volumes of Nick's photographs and my short stories, all proceeds from which will go to mental health charities, which can also be bought from strangeplaygrounds.com. And you can also find me on the Twitter page Enigmatic Elegy and the YouTube channel Exaggerated Elegy.
I think you've done that just to confuse me. I'm sure of it.
Yes, I did exactly that. That's exactly why I did it.
I would say, please, guys, go out there and get yourself a copy of Born in Blood. There aren't many times where I'm doing the reading of something and I freak myself out. Which I did with this.
Good. That's exactly my intention.
As for myself, you can find me here. You can find me at The Creeks. You can find both these shows at www.oldoilhouse.co.uk or thefluffenhammer.weebly.com or thecreeks.weebly.com. You can also find them on YouTube at my personal YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/growthlock. You can find all of my audio readings books there as well. You can also find my work at rivetedsounds.co.uk, where there is multiple things up. There is a sale currently going on where you can get Mean Streets, the history of the 2D fighter, for just £1. You can get Philip K. Dick's We Can Remember It For You wholesale for just £1. There is loads up there. Go and buy, my little chickadees. And that being said, I think that's everything. It's nearly 10 o'clock. I'm ready for a cup of tea. And thank you very much, George.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Time to close the doors and reinvigorate the seals and wards of the Black Library, I think.
So. There is a guy over there in a big robe who is telling us to shush. By shush, I mean pointing at some kind of Eversole sniper rifle at us. So I think it's time to go.
Okie dokie. Time to move on. Time to move on, I think.
Thank you very much, guys. Good night.
Bye-bye.
In this town there lived a ganger by the name of Nocturne Red. Many judges tried to take him, and those men of law were dead. He was vicious and augmented at the age of 104, and the notches on his last locks numbered 10 and fourscore more. 10 and fourscore more. Now the stranger started showing there to all the folks around. A strange brooch of foreign metal got the guy in silver bound. He came here on bitter business to leave all the sinners dead. And on the list of purged was the name of Nocturne Red. The name of Nocturne Red. Wasn't long before the rumors were relayed to Nocturne Red. But the ganger didn't worry, he would leave the Quister dead. 90 men had tried to end him, 90 men had made a slip. 91 would be the Quister with the poke gun on his head. Poke gun on his head. It was 37 minutes before the Quister found his prey. They met in a darkened factory where the bravest feared to stray. Scum were watching from the gantries, muted creatures held their breath. They hoped this holy agent was about to meet his death. About to meet his death. There was 40 feet between them when they stopped to make their play. And the swiftness of the Quister is still talked about today. Nocturne Red and Knocklit Plasteel, for both shell fairly tore. And the Quister's aim was blessed by our holy emperor. Our holy emperor. It was over in a moment and the final cleanse began. Mutant scum were cut down, righteous, brightly burning as they ran. For the stranger brought stormtroopers and the hive had made a slip. None escapes the Emperor's Quister with the bolt gun on his head. Bolt gun on his head. Bolt gun, Mars bolt gun. None escapes the Emperor's Quister with the bolt gun on his head. Bolt gun on his head.